Today is the beginning of a new 3-week series. It's going to get us up to our Serve Day on July 28th, a 3-week series on emotional intelligence. And show of hands, I assume most of you, who here has either heard of or read the book, Emotional Intelligence? A good many of you. This is a really popular concept that comes from a best-selling book by Daniel Goleman. First edition was written in 1995, and then he released an updated edition in 2020, which you can see why emotional intelligence, in 2020, if you think about what was going on, he's probably, it's probably a good time to re-release my book this year. So this is the newest copy here. It's Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. And so we're going to be looking at this book, but then also, of course, the scriptures. We preach sermons from the Bible. And what Paul calls the fruit of the Spirit, the results of having the Spirit in your life. And we're going to see some intersections between the fruit of the Spirit and emotional intelligence. And as Sandy mentioned, today is also Communion Day. If you didn't get a chance to pick up a communion cup in a basket at the top of the aisle, you can go back there at any time and get a communion cup. We'll have communion at the end of the service. If you're online with us, just have a piece of bread and a beverage ready at the end of the service, and we'll have communion together. Now, you know that IQ stands for intelligence quotient, and at one time, IQ tests were considered the standard for intelligence. Not so much anymore, but IQ tests generally measure a person's skill in math and logic. You have your number 2 lead pencil, and questions like, if X is greater than Y and the train leaves Yuma at 5:10, what's the hypotenuse of the triangle? And you're like, D, all of the above. And we've probably taken tests like that. The point of Goleman's book is that emotional intelligence might actually be more important than IQ for success in life. That could be success in business, success in your workplace, success in your relationships. Maybe even success defined as how happy you are in life and the level of joy and peace you feel. How many people do you know who maybe they're really intelligent people, but they have a hard time in life in general, or a hard time in relationships, or a hard time getting along with people? So, point made. In business life, let's say 2 people are looking for a job, and one is turning in a resume cold without knowing anyone, and the other person who's applying knows the hiring manager. What do you think? Because it's all who you, help me? No. So relationships, emotional intelligence, networking with other people makes you more likely to get the job. And it comes down to just more than just making money. If you're in a competitive field and you're trying to succeed and you're trying to get your ideas out there and make your mark in the world, and you have somebody who's, 2 people rather, who are really qualified and maybe equally intelligent, but one of them is really emotionally intelligent and connects with other people well and shares ideas and build relationships well, which one has the advantage? It's pretty obvious. If that's true in business, then what does that say about marriage or friendships or personal relationships or, frankly, church relationships? Every time I've met with a married couple who were experiencing problems, they both had reasonably high IQs. Their intelligence wasn't the issue. The marriage problems stem from something missing in their emotional lives, or maybe in their ability to relate to each other emotionally. Negotiating and working through conflict requires emotional intelligence. Maybe their shared EQ, emotional intelligence quotient, was not as high as their IQ. And then outside of relationships, what if we're just talking about you and how you feel? There are people who go through life feeling like they have to hide who they are, feeling like they have to hide their emotions, how they really feel. Maybe they picked up along the way messages that if you show your emotion to people, then they're going to reject you, and they won't like that. And now, because of how our society functions, many people are probably raised to not develop their emotional intelligence. Think about little children who cry and who are unfortunately told by their parents, stop crying. Instead of addressing what the issue is, just stop crying. And what message is that parent sending to that little impressionable child? Stop displaying your emotions. Stop feeling what you're feeling. and stop showing me what you're feeling because I don't want to see it. Your emotions bother me. So that child grows up with their primary caregiver telling them your emotions don't matter and your emotions are a bother to other people. If you want people to like you, you have to hide your emotions. Some of you feel like that and you don't know why. And maybe it's traced back to something that happened really early in life. So many of us grow up feeling like life is a game of poker. And we have to hide our emotions because of our competition. Maybe we see other people as competition, or they're out to get us, or they won't like us, they won't accept us. If they see our emotions, it will tip off our hand. And they won't like us. And so we kind of go through life with this blank expression on our face, metaphorically, like we just don't really feel free to share our emotions or own our emotions or even know what our emotions are. What's that blank expression called? It's called a poker face. And we hide our emotions from other people. And after a while, maybe we're not even able to see our own emotions any longer. We're disconnected from our emotional life. And then you think about our public life that Sandy alluded to in her prayer. In the last half of 2024 America, how important is emotional intelligence going to be? What do you think? As we face yet another presidential election that's going to be probably similar to the last one. We could be in for a wild ride even for the next couple of weeks. And I just talked to somebody this morning who was talking about an experience they had with somebody who was kind of trolling them over politics and culture war issues. And the person I was talking to displayed enough emotional intelligence to know the difference between people who want to have a discussion with you and actually engage with you, and it's worth your time to do so, and people who are just trolling you. Have you learned the difference over the past few years? It takes emotional intelligence to do that. And then when you see social media posts and you know how they make you feel, how do you deal with those emotions? And I don't know, this seems true to me. It seems like there are more people in our public life, politicians, candidates, who lack emotional intelligence. Anybody understand what I'm saying? And more than just one. It seems like there's a growing number of them who just don't have empathy, and maybe they're afraid. They seem to be full of fear, and they're xenophobic, and they seem to lack emotional intelligence. So perhaps it's time for us as a people to demand that our leaders are emotionally intelligent. And then just one other example, in our spiritual lives. Our spiritual lives and our emotions are linked. And most of us want to feel love and joy and peace and we feel a sense of goodness, but sometimes we're not sure how to get there, especially in the world that we live in. And so our emotions, our emotional intelligence is linked to our spiritual lives. Well, the good news is that Daniel Goleman, the author here, says that while IQ is largely fixed, emotional intelligence is learned and learnable. That you and I can learn to become more emotionally intelligent. So we're going to dive in here, and here is a definition of emotional intelligence. And we're only going to cover the first one today, but here's what emotional intelligence looks like. Looks like becoming aware of your emotions. That's all we're going to cover today because it's so important. Next week, we're going to talk about managing your emotions and motivating yourself with positive emotion. And so you can kind of see how emotional intelligence unfolds here in Daniel Goleman's model. And then the ability to empathize with others, to enter into another person's experience, to walk a mile in somebody's shoes and connect with them. Empathizing, it can be kind of a synonym with connection, to be able to connect with other people. And then, of course, to relate to other people in a healthy way. And so Daniel Goleman says that's what emotional intelligence looks like. And today we're going to start with what he says is the foundation of emotional intelligence, and none of the rest are possible without step one here, becoming aware of your emotions. So Daniel Goleman writes, self-awareness, recognizing a feeling as it happens. That's how he defines self-awareness. Recognizing a feeling as it happens is the keystone of emotional intelligence. The ability to monitor feelings from moment to moment is crucial to psychological insight and self-understanding. This is monitoring your own feelings, not somebody else's yet. We're not talking about that. We're monitoring our own feelings here. People with greater certainty about their feelings are better pilots of their lives, having a sure sense of how they really feel about personal decisions, from whom to marry to what job to take. And so Goleman believes that self-awareness is the first and most important element in emotional intelligence. And every other element of emotional intelligence flows through that. I have a 1-minute clip of Daniel Goleman, the author. And he's actually speaking at the United Nations headquarters. He's been very influential. And he's speaking about self-awareness and how important it is. It's about a minute long. Let's watch this video.
Here's what I mean by emotional intelligence in a more granular way. There are 4 components. And by the way, there are many models of emotional intelligence. This is the one I prefer. The key is self-awareness, tuning into yourself, understanding what matters to you, what your strengths are, what your limits are. That turns out to be the most important ability, even though it's the least visible. Because being able to manage yourself well means first tuning into yourself. If you're tuned out of a range of your experience, you won't pick it up in other people, which has to do with the self-awareness, the social awareness, the empathy ability. And you put all of that together in handling your relationships. And then there's the question, what is it for? And I believe it's to have a positive impact on other people. That's what emotional intelligence is for.
It begins with self-awareness, and everything else flows out of that. So, and I love how he ends the video by saying that the point of emotional intelligence is to make a positive impact on the world, to get outside of ourselves and do good things in the world. So, all right, last Thursday on the 4th, Hannah and I took our 2 sons to see Inside Out 2. Has anybody seen the movie yet? It deserves applause, doesn't it? Feel free to applaud Inside Out 2. What a brilliant movie. I won't throw out any spoilers, but what a brilliant movie. And the first Inside Out was actually the first movie that we ever took our oldest son to in a theater. And at the time, maybe he was like 4 years old. It was a long time ago, surprisingly. Usually they put these sequels out really quickly, especially when the movie's good, but it took him a long time to get to Inside Out 2 here. But we took him when he was a little guy. And you can imagine, I mean, parents of a toddler, pre-K student, sitting through Inside Out, if you've seen that movie, it wasn't that we were trying not to cry. Like that, there was no hope trying not to cry. We were trying not to ugly cry, like to try to mitigate the amount of sobbing and the facial expressions during the movie. So this past Thursday, we took our 2 sons, who are now 13 and 8, to Inside Out 2, and I knew what shape I was in during the first one, so I knew what was coming. And I was, next to me was my 13-year-old, and then our 8-year-old, and then their mom. And I got maybe, 1 minute into the movie during the first scene, and I'm starting to wipe tears out of my eyes, and we were in seats that reclined. This is a really nice theater at Santan Village, and I was trying to recline. It was just past my 13-year-old, so he couldn't see me wiping tears out of my eyes. And trying to hide it the best I possibly could, but it was a futile effort. What a beautiful movie. And what got me as soon as the movie started was just the main premise of the movie. So no spoilers again here. It's the fact that little Riley, the main character in the movie, her emotions have names. Right? They're characters. Her emotions are characters in the movie, and their names are the name of the emotion. So if you've seen the movie, either one, little pop quiz. Who's the little red guy? Anger, right? And then how about the little one laying on the floor there? Sadness, and she's blue. And then who's the really happy-looking character in the yellow dress and the blue hair? Joy. And I love how Joy's kind of the leader, right? Joy's kind of the norm. I love that. And then how about the purple guy? Fear. And then the little green gal there? Disgust, yeah. And these are emotions that little Riley feels, and there may be some new emotions introduced in Inside Out 2, and that's all I'll say about that. But the fact that we see what's going on in her head, and these emotions are characters, and they have names. Her emotions have names, and that's good. That's okay. They exist, and they're working, and you can have more than one emotion controlling things at the same time. Sometimes the emotions fight over the controls for Riley's mind, and that's okay. And there are times when one emotion is needed more than the other. And that's okay. Because sometimes, we feel like we have to fake it to make it. Or don't show your emotions, but all the emotions have a place in little Riley's life. That got me in the first 30 seconds. Just the fact that these emotions have names and there's a place for all of them. And once again, I just tried as hard as I could not to ugly cry. But when it comes to self-awareness, Goleman quotes John Mayer, not the guitarist, but the psychologist and professor, at the University of New Hampshire. And John Mayer writes this: self-awareness, in short, means being aware of both our mood and our thoughts about that mood. So isn't that great? Being aware of our mood and our thoughts about that mood. And that's what's going on inside out. So not only am I aware of my feeling, okay, here's how I feel right now, but here's why I feel that way, and here's what I think about all that. And all of that can go on in our minds at the same time, just like inside out. So if you've been around churches that I've pastored for a while, you've heard some recycled stories, because there are some experiences I've had in life, just like you, where they have been formative to me. And I tend to repeat those stories over time. So if you've heard this, I'm sorry, but many of you are new, and maybe you haven't heard this story yet. But when I started my master's program in 2008, I started a master's program in a seminary. It's where pastors get their master's degree. And in the first year of this seminary, they required counseling for everybody, which is a brilliant idea, by the way, for pastors. It's a really good idea. It's definitely important. And you had to go to counseling for an entire year, your first year of seminary. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. I sat down with this counselor, and she was actually a grad student as well, getting ready to graduate, and just excellent. She did an excellent job. And during one of the early sessions, maybe even the first session, she asked me, well, how do you feel right now? And I was like, what? Pardon? And she was like, well, how do you feel right now? And I was like, and him-hawed around, and I couldn't really give her an answer. And she kind of had this look on her face, like, oh, okay, we'll see what's going on in this guy's head. So she probed a little bit, and she talked about, well, we want to be aware of our feelings. We want to be in touch with our feelings. How do you feel right now? And I go, I guess I'm okay, And very quickly, embarrassingly quickly, she realized this guy isn't really aware of his emotional life. There's a disconnect between this guy's head and heart. He's not really aware from moment to moment of how he feels. I'm embarrassed to say that, but that's how it happened. He doesn't really know how he feels from moment to moment. There could be many reasons for that. Or maybe he knows deep down, but he doesn't want to say it. Maybe he has learned to hide his emotions. So what she did was she handed me this sheet of paper, and it had columns of emotion words on the sheet of paper. And I felt like a first grader, like see, spot, run, see, and just learning to read again. And I looked at this sheet of paper with emotion words, and, well, I guess I feel, blank. And she said, okay, I've got homework for you. As you go throughout your day, brushing your teeth, driving to work, during a break, whenever, I want you to look at this sheet of paper and ask yourself, how do I feel right now and why? How do I feel right now? And look at the paper, and then this is all totally true. Look at the paper. It's embarrassing to admit it. Look at the paper and pick out a word that you think matches your emotions. And then okay, here's my emotion. You name your emotion. And then you ask yourself, okay, why do I feel this way? If you feel agitated on the way to work, okay, is it because you're in a hurry? Right? She gave me examples just to prime the pump, And so I started keeping this little journal and brushing my teeth. How do I feel right now and why? And at that particular time in my life, I was 31 years old, by the way, a 31-year-old dude. And I was brushing my teeth and thinking, how do I feel right now? I don't know. I guess I feel a little uptight. there's work stress, and I'm hurrying to get ready, and I don't know, I feel a certain way, and then walking to the car, how do I feel right now and why? And then getting in the car and driving away, how do I feel right now and why? And I guess I kind of feel sad, I kind of feel angry, and okay, why? And well, there's work stuff going on, and we got to a stoplight, and how do I feel right now and why? And one of the things she also told me was, if you can answer those two questions, start to ask yourself, when have I felt like this before? And you can kind of trace it back. And how long have I felt like this? And so I'm working through this exercise while I'm in a hurry getting ready for work. And how do I feel right now and why? And I got to a stoplight a couple of miles from where I lived. And tears were coming out of my eyes. Because I realized that I was feeling emotions that I felt often and that I felt for a long time. And they had to do with my upbringing. And that escalated quickly. From brushing your teeth, to getting in the car and driving. How do I feel right now and why and where? When have I felt like this before? And that was the beginning for me of this journey toward being aware of my emotional life. I'm embarrassed to say it. I was just cut off between my head and my heart. And there are reasons for that. And I know now I'm not the only one who goes through life like that. It was life-changing for me. First, you name the emotion. How do I feel right now? And you name it as precisely as you possibly can. How do I feel right now? You might start with a general word, and then you might start to whittle it down. How do I feel right now? And then you ask yourself why, and then you trace the emotion back to its origin to discover why maybe you felt that way a long time ago, and maybe you felt that way a lot throughout your life. And so kind of like what this counselor did for me, I have this graphic. It's called the emotion wheel. And again, you might feel like, see, spot, run, and you're not going to be able to see all these words in here. But there are a lot of feeling words, aren't there? A lot of emotional words, a lot of descriptive words. And then inside, we'll zoom in here in a second, but inside there are general emotions. You're fine, you're okay. General emotions inside, and then as you go out towards the edges of the wheel, there are more specific emotions. You can go ahead and zoom in there, Susie. So let's look at the emotion of anger. So I feel angry. That's the general word. And then the next concentric circle out, you get a little bit more specific. Can you all see that print on the screen? So let down, humiliated, bitter, mad, aggressive, frustrated, distant, critical. Okay, you're getting more in touch with your feelings now. It's not just that I feel angry, but now, okay, I feel frustrated. By the way, you might be using this wheel more and more during 2024 as the year progresses, correct? I feel frustrated. And then you get out to this outer circle and look at the even more detailed words you have. Betrayed, resentful, disrespected, ridiculed, indignant, violated, furious, jealous, provoked, hostile, infuriated, annoyed, withdrawn, numb, skeptical, dismissive. And you're able, as you complete this exercise more and more, how do I feel right now and why, to use more and more specific words, to name your emotions, just like inside out, specific words. Here's how I feel right now. I feel annoyed and withdrawn when I see social media posts supporting people that I think are destructive to America. I know that won't apply to anybody. Here, it's just me, right? I feel annoyed and withdrawn. Maybe I feel provoked at times by people who are trying to troll, who are making comments, maybe social media, maybe at a family dinner. Maybe I feel provoked, and you're able to name the emotion that you feel. That's the beginning of self-awareness. And then as you practice, you're able to get more and more specific as you name those emotions. Now, for some of us, it might be that you find that there's a particular emotion, and you could just Google this emotion wheel. Google emotion wheel, and you'll see the same graphic. You might find that there's a general feeling, a general emotion that you tend to carry more than the others. And maybe it's like sadness has taken over the wheel, like an inside out, or disgust, or anger. And there would be people in society who just pass it off, they have anger issues. Well, but there are reasons for that. So, but maybe there's this emotion that you kind of feel is your default mode, and it's just always there. It's always humming beneath the surface. And you could start to name that. What is that emotion? I feel this a lot. And then you start to trace that back. Man, I felt like this yesterday, and I felt like this the day before. I felt like this when I was 10. I felt like this when I was 7. And I had this ordeal with my parents when I was 7. And that's the first time I remember feeling like this. And boy, now we're cooking with gas. Because now you're having insights about deep emotional streams throughout your life. And you're able to see yourself more clearly than you ever did before. And maybe you're like me, though, and you're like, man, I'm not an emotional person. I have no way of knowing that. Well, you just put one foot in front of the other. And it starts with that homework, like see, spot, run, to be able to look at an emotion, or an emotion wheel, and say, that's how I feel right now. And why do I feel that way? When's the last time I felt that way? When did I first feel that way? And begin to trace it back. Well, in my experience through that 1 year of counseling, as I got more in touch with my emotional life, I had to deal with anger and sadness, things that, just like all of us, that happen early in life to varying degrees, and wounds that take place, and memories and losses, relationships that I wish I would have had with certain people in my life, and was able to begin to deal with that now. By the end of that year of counseling, I was able to have breakthroughs in forgiveness and releasing emotions, being able to cry, being able to express my emotions that I never thought possible before that. And it was because of this exercise, what Daniel Goleman calls the foundation of emotional intelligence, self-awareness. And then over time, what began to happen in my life was that emotions like joy and love and peace began to rise to the surface for me. And I instantly thought of what we call the fruit of the Spirit in Scripture. In Galatians chapter 5, the Apostle Paul writes this letter to followers of Jesus who are living in the province of Galatia, which is now central Turkey, so it's called Galatians. And he's contrasting people who believe that a spiritual life is about living according to external rules and laws and kind of being extrinsically motivated. And he says, no, really being a spiritual person is about what's happening in your heart and letting the Spirit of God live in you and through you and what comes out of that. And you begin to have emotions and experiences and behaviors that look like this. And he rattles off this fruit of the Spirit. I think I have them here, Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. These sound good, don't they? Patience. Do we need these in 2024 America? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. Oh my goodness, how much we need kindness. Goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Paul says, against such things there is no law. There is no religious law that could ever make you more spiritual than if you get to a place in life where you're able to feel these emotions, and these become the dominant emotions and experiences in your life. Now, just like little Riley, you're always going to have sadness and anger and disgust and fear and other emotions happening, and those are all good. We don't have to mask them or run away from them. Matter of fact, we want to be aware of them and own them, and it's okay to feel those things. There are times that it's appropriate to feel those things. But over time, the dominant emotions begin to look like the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, and so on. And the first ability of emotionally intelligent people is to be aware of their emotions, to be able to name them, to know why you feel that way, to be able to think about your emotions, to be able to monitor your emotional life, know where they come from, where they started. And as you feel them over time, naturally, little by little, you're going to start to feel these emotions come out. Isn't that a beautiful picture Paul paints? And he doesn't, of course, use the word emotional intelligence, or the phrase emotional intelligence, but as I look at this and what it means to be a spiritual person and the kind of spirituality that so many people hunger for, that we're desperate for right now, it looks a lot like this. And then Goleman said, we're doing all this to make a positive impact in the world. And so as we become aware of our own emotions, we know why we feel that way. We know when we began feeling that way. And we let the fruit of the Spirit come to the forefront as we are healed over time. Then we can begin to make a positive impact and let these kinds of emotions flow out of us in our actions, in our behaviors. And then beautiful things happen. So a large group of you served a couple of Fridays ago at our Feed the Hungry event. Look at this beautiful group of people here. Can we hear it for folks who served at our Feed the Hungry event? And all of these folks here from the well went and we went to Feed My Starving Children, which many of you have probably been to. It's a great organization. And you made enough food boxes to feed 104 children for an entire year. Isn't that cool? Because you wanted to go serve and express love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness. They weren't just feelings for you, but their actions. They came out of your feelings, out of your spiritual life, and then they turned into actions, as Goleman says, to make a positive impact on the world. And then on Sunday, July 28th, we're actually going to cancel the worship service here. So there's not going to be music, no sermon on July 28th. We're not even going to be in this room. What we're going to do at 10 a.m., same regular time, we're going to meet out in the lobby out here. And we're just going to line up tables across that entire lobby. And I'm asking all of us if you go to my weekly email, there's a link there for a sign-up genius. And there are hygiene products that you can purchase and bring with you on July 28th. Then we're going to take all those hygiene products and pack them into bags. We're going to make about 50 bags. And they're going to be given to children at Niños de Baja, which is an orphanage in Baja, Mexico, this fall. And so how many of you think that's pretty cool to cancel a worship service and serve together as a church? Maybe that's a good idea for a church to do that. And so if you go to my weekly email, you click on that Sign Up Genius link. We've already gotten a lot of sign-ups already. Thank you to those who have already done it. And just bring those items with you on July 28th. We'll collect them all. We'll make a huge mess. And then we're going to organize all of it into these 50 hygiene bags. And you're going to be able to express love and joy and peace and goodness and kindness to these kids at Niños de Baja. It's all a part of emotional intelligence and linking our emotions in our spiritual lives and letting love and goodness and the fruit of the Spirit come out of us as we heal out of our own self-awareness. And then sometime this fall, we're still working out the exact dates. We want to take another trip to Niños de Baja. We're trying to get it around fall break for Chandler, which is the last weekend in September and like that first weekend of October, just to kind of put that bug in your ear. Some of you went back in February. Maybe you'd like to go back again to Niños. Maybe you didn't get to go the first time, and you'd like to go this fall. So think last weekend in September-ish. That's what we're looking at right now, to take those hygiene products and toys and other supplies down to Niños. So back in February, I'm going to close with this. 9 of us from the well visited Niños de Baja back in February. And this is it's called a Casa Hogar. It's an orphanage. And in Mexico, the foster care system is still orphanage-based. And Niños has been around for decades at this point, but they house about 50 kids, and pretty much equal age groups between boys and girls, and then little ones and teenagers. And you can imagine the stories that these kids have to go through to end up in the foster care system in Mexico. Some of them have horrific backgrounds that would just break your heart. And then the policia pick them up, and they bring them to Niños de Baja. And when you hear that, of course, these are terrible situations that these kids are coming out of. And then, you hear about it in church, and you go down and visit. And what usually happens is that, Americans like us, we go down expecting to see these poor, sad Mexican orphans, and we're going to go help them. And what you actually find when you get down there is you find 4 homes, because the kids live in these 4 homes according to gender and their age. 4 homes full of love and warmth and smiles and laughter and playing together, and a ton of emotional intelligence in these homes. And had a conversation with Dale, who connected us on the way back here, and we both kind of quickly agreed. There are a lot of Americans who go down there and they figure out, like, my family home is not as happy as what this orphanage is. And it becomes a challenge to the Americans who go down there to serve. And isn't that the way serving always works? That you always benefit way more than you think you're going to, sometimes more than the people that you're serving. And you come back thinking, wow, there's so much happiness there, and joy there, and goodness there. And anyway, so it can be a great experience for people to go serve. But as soon as we arrived in February, the director, Mike, told us that the night before, at 11 p.m., a new little boy named Juan had just been dropped off at Niños. And what happens is the police drop them off at any time of the night, and they know their name and they know their age. And I can't remember exactly. Juan was between 6 and 8 years old, something like that. And it will take a couple of weeks for Niños to actually get a report from the police about what actually happened in Juan's life to get him to Niños de Baja. Again, you use your imagination. Usually it's abuse or neglect because of drug addiction. And sometimes these kids have horrific stories, traumatized when they arrive. So little Juan had just been dropped off at 11 p.m. the night before, and our group went to these various homes where the kids live to meet these kids and to meet the house parents and to meet their tias, their aunts or their aunts. And we walked into the house where Juan was, and you have all these little boys, maybe 10 little boys around my youngest son's age. And it was a little chilly that night, so most of them were cuddled up under blankets, and they're all watching a movie together in the living room. And the house parents were in there, and the tia was in there. We met her, and then all these little kids. Some of them were kind of playing around and like joking with each other, and they're all having a great time. And where do you think little Juan was? Little Juan was cuddled up next to the tia on the couch, underneath a blanket. And this was his first full day at Niños de Baja. So not only were we meeting him, but these other kids, his new, brothers and sisters, essentially, were meeting him. And I just walked into that scene, and I looked, and I saw the tia there, and she was cuddled up next to Juan, under his blanket. And it occurred to me, she knows that he needs the most love and attention right now. He's brand new here, and he's probably scared. And he's meeting all these people for the first time. And so she's got him right by her side, offering him kind of protection and comfort. And he looked happy. He looked happy to be there. And some of the other kids were like, "Hey, Juan," and just meeting him and trying to joke around a little bit. And I didn't think of the exact phrase at the time, but I'm telling this story in Emotional Intelligence sermon because of this. What was really happening there was the emotional intelligence in that home leveled me. That I realized these house parents and these tias, they know what these kids need. They know the love that these kids need. They know what they've been through. That tia knows little Juan needs extra love and protection. They know that he's the one who needs most of the cuddles. And just the love in that room to welcome him struck me. That's why this is such a great place. It's because of emotional intelligence. It's because there are people who live out of love and joy and peace and kindness and goodness and patience. And they understand what these kids need, and they're able to connect with these kids on a deep emotional level and meet their needs. And I remember just thinking, this is just good. There is goodness here. That this little boy can be dropped off at 11 p.m. the night before, and he's part of the family. He's part of the family. He knows he is loved, and he's wanted, and he's warm and protected, and he's got cuddles, and the truth is, already in one day, little Juan might be experiencing more love than he ever has in his life at Niños de Baja. When we serve together on July 28th, that's what you're going to be a part of. That's what you're going to be benefiting. A place where kids come with these horrible needs, these horrible situations and deep needs, and they find an emotionally intelligent group of people who are able to show love and joy and peace. And so Daniel Goleman says emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness. The ability to know how you're feeling and why, and you can get in touch with your own emotions, and you're not in a mood or a funk and you don't know why, but you can monitor. You're aware of how you feel and why and when you felt that way before. And over time, as you express that emotion and get more in touch with it and you heal, maybe counseling is a part of that. Over time, the primary emotions that you begin to feel are the fruit of the Spirit that Paul described: love, joy, peace. And then as Goleman says, you're able to let those flow out of you and make a positive impact in the world. We're going to take communion together now. So if you have your communion cup here, I invite you to pull that out. And if you're online, a piece of bread and a beverage. And when we take communion here, every first Sunday of the month, we always try to relate it to in some way to the message. And you think about Jesus having a meal with his disciples the night he was betrayed, all of the emotions that he was feeling. He would be arrested soon after this because one of his disciples betrayed him. And then he had thankfulness, I'm sure, because of the time that he had spent with his closest friends. He felt fear. He may have felt anger towards Judas. That certainly would have been expected. If Jesus had the emotion wheel in front of him, he may have felt disgust toward the Romans and toward Pontius Pilate and those who opposed him. He may have been able to name all kinds of emotions at the same time from that emotion wheel. And yet, he shared this meal with his disciples, and he went about making his positive impact on the world out of love. Scripture even says, amazingly, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And somehow Jesus let what we call the fruit of the Spirit come to the forefront in this milieu of emotions that he felt. And he made his positive impact. And so maybe that's what we have in mind as we take communion today. And Jesus shared this meal with his disciples, and he took bread, he thanked God for it, and he broke it, and he said, this is my body broken for you. As often as you eat it, let's eat of the bread. In the same way he took the cup, he thanked God for it. He said, this is my blood of the new covenant, shed for the forgiveness of sins. As often as you drink it, remember me. Let's drink. God, as we take communion and we think about the range of emotions that Jesus must have felt, and we look at this list that Paul gives us, the fruit of the Spirit, and I'm thinking about taking my kids to Inside Out, and all of the emotions in the emotion wheel. Oh God, we all have our stories. Just like the kids at Niños de Baja, we all have our experiences. We have messages given to us in childhood. We have them reinforced throughout life. We have our work situations. If we're in a relationship with a significant other, our relationship affects how we see ourselves and how free we feel to express our emotions. As we begin this series, oh God, Daniel Goleman tells us that the first step and the most important step in emotional intelligence is to become aware of our emotions. How do I feel right now, and why? And that can be scary for some of us. Some, like me, would kind of feel like they're in emotional kindergarten, just starting to learn to be self-aware. Maybe the emotion wheel would help. Others, maybe a little farther along the journey. But we all have our stories. And oh God, this week as we begin to ask ourselves that question, how do I feel right now, and why, and when have I felt this way before? No matter where we are in that journey, we will become more self-aware. We will be put on a path of feeling our emotions more deeply and getting on a path towards healing if we want to do that. Maybe talking to a counselor, maybe talking to a friend, maybe journaling, maybe Googling some things. How do I deal with emotions like this? And that can put us on a path towards healing, God, where over time, even in that particular area, if it's an area of pain, we can begin to see your hand at work and experience healing in that area. And over time, the emotions that Paul lists as the fruit of the Spirit begin to rise to the top. Maybe where there was primarily sadness, maybe some joy starts to sneak in. Maybe some peace starts to find its way, like inside out. And maybe those fruit of the Spirit emotions start to take the controls a little bit more over time, and then we let that flow out of us in experiences like our Feed the Hungry event, Serve Day, and conversations with friends, the way we treat other people, the way we communicate at work, the way we communicate with our significant other, our families, the way we deal with social media posts that are just going to be completely off the chain this fall, the way we deal with family members who may even try to provoke us at times. Even in all of that, the primary emotions begin to look more like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control, those fruit of the Spirit. All the other emotions are valid. We can own them. We don't have to hide them. But over time, those fruit of the Spirit become more and more primary in our lives. And we have taken giant leaps forward in a journey towards emotional intelligence. And we thank you. In Jesus' name. Everybody said,